The Dreamer's Labyrinth. Thomas opened his eyes to the gentle sway of a train carriage, the rhythmic clacking of wheels on tracks, a soothing melody in the background. He blinked, disoriented, as he took in his surroundings. Plush leather seats, polished wood paneling, and the warm glow of Art Deco lamps greeted him. Outside the window, a blur of lush green countryside rushed by, occasionally punctuated by the fleeting silhouettes of trees. "Where am I?" he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. His mind felt foggy, as if he had just woken from a deep slumber. He couldn't quite remember how he had gotten here or where he was going. A soft chuckle from across the compartment drew his attention. An elderly gentleman with kind eyes and a neatly trimmed silver beard smiled at him. "Ah, the eternal question, my boy. Where are we indeed? Perhaps a better question might be, when are we?" Thomas frowned, confusion etching deeper lines into his forehead. "I'm sorry, I don't understand. Who are you?" The old man's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Who I am is not important. What matters is who you are, Thomas. And more importantly, why you're here." A chill ran down Thomas's spine. How did this stranger know his name? He opened his mouth to ask, but the old man held up a hand, silencing him. "You're here because you're looking for something, Thomas. Something you've lost. Or perhaps something you've never truly had." As the old man spoke, the train carriage began to shift and blur around them. The wood paneling melted away, revealing stark white walls. The plush seats transformed into clinical hospital beds. Thomas found himself standing in a long corridor, the sterile smell of disinfectant assaulting his nostrils. "What's happening?" Thomas asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Where are we now?" The old man was gone, replaced by a nurse in crisp white uniform. She smiled at him, but there was something unsettling about the expression. "You're right where you need to be, Mr. Carter. It's time for your treatment." Before Thomas could protest, the nurse took his arm and led him down the corridor. Doors lined either side, each bearing a small window. As they passed, Thomas caught glimpses of the rooms beyond, some empty, some occupied by figures lying motionless on beds, connected to strange machines. They stopped at a door near the end of the hall. The nurse produced a key and unlocked it, ushering Thomas inside. The room was small and spartanly furnished, containing only a single bed and a complex-looking device on a wheeled stand beside it. "Please lie down," the nurse instructed, gesturing to the bed. "Dr. Cobb will be with you shortly." Thomas hesitated, a nagging feeling in the pit of his stomach telling him that something was very wrong. But as he looked at the nurse, her features began to shift and blur, just as the train carriage had done earlier. In the blink of an eye, she transformed into a familiar face, his wife, Sarah. "It's okay, honey," Sarah said, her voice warm and reassuring. "This will help you remember. Don't you want to remember?" The tension in Thomas's body eased at the sight of his wife. Of course, how could he have forgotten? He was here for treatment, to recover his lost memories. He nodded and lay down on the bed, allowing Sarah to attach electrodes to his temples and forehead. "Close your eyes," Sarah whispered, her hand gently squeezing his. "When you wake up, everything will make sense." Thomas obeyed, letting his eyelids flutter shut. He heard the soft whir of the machine beside him powering up, felt a tingling sensation spread across his scalp, and then darkness engulfed him, When Thomas opened his eyes again, he found himself standing on a bustling city street. Skyscrapers towered overhead, their glass facades reflecting the warm glow of the setting sun. People hurried past him, their faces a blur of motion and color. He turned in a slow circle, taking in his surroundings. Something about the city felt familiar yet subtly wrong. The buildings seemed to stretch impossibly high, their tops lost in a haze of clouds. The streets curved and intersected at odd angles, creating a labyrinthine network that defied the laws of geometry. A hand on his shoulder made him jump. He spun around to find a man in a sharp suit standing behind him, a knowing smile on his face. "Welcome back, Thomas," the man said. "I'm Arthur. We've been waiting for you." Thomas frowned, searching his memory for any recognition of the name or face. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" Arthur's smile didn't waver. "In a manner of speaking, we've worked together before, though you might not remember. That's why we're here, to help you remember." As Arthur spoke, the city around them began to shift and change. Buildings rearranged themselves like pieces on a chessboard. Streets folded and unfolded like origami. Thomas watched in awe and confusion as the landscape transformed into something entirely new. They now stood at the edge of a vast desert, golden sand stretching as far as the eye could see. In the distance, a lone structure rose from the dunes, a massive, impossible staircase that seemed to lead straight into the sky. "What is this place?" Thomas asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Arthur gestured towards the staircase. "This is the first level, Thomas. Your mind created it as a representation of your journey. Each step you climb will take you deeper into your subconscious, closer to the truth you're seeking." Thomas took a hesitant step towards the staircase, then paused. "What truth? What am I looking for?" "That's something only you can answer," Arthur replied. "But I can tell you this, at the top of that staircase lies the key to unlocking your memories. The question is, are you ready to face what you might find?" A gust of wind swept across the desert, kicking up a swirl of sand around them. Thomas squinted against the grit, raising a hand to shield his eyes. When he lowered it, Arthur was gone, leaving him alone at the foot of the impossible staircase. For a moment, Thomas stood frozen, uncertainty warring with curiosity inside him. Then, with a deep breath, he placed his foot on the first step and began to climb. As he ascended, the world around him continued to shift and change. The desert faded away, replaced by a lush jungle. Vines and creepers wound their way around the staircase, and the air grew thick with humidity. Strange, colorful birds called out from the canopy above, their cries echoing in the dense foliage. Thomas climbed on, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he pushed himself higher and higher. The stairs seemed endless, each turn revealing another flight stretching up into the mist. Just as he thought he could go no further, the stairs ended abruptly. Thomas found himself standing on a small platform, surrounded on all sides by swirling clouds. Before him stood a simple wooden door, weathered and ancient-looking. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as it grasped the tarnished brass knob. With a deep breath, he turned it and pushed the door open. A blinding light engulfed him, and Thomas felt himself falling. He cried out, arms flailing as he tumbled through empty space. Just as suddenly as it had begun, the fall ended, and he found himself lying on a soft surface, gasping for breath. As his eyes adjusted to the dim light, Thomas realized he was in a bedroom, his bedroom. The familiar scent of Sarah's perfume lingered in the air, and he could hear the soft ticking of the antique clock on the nightstand. He sat up, running a hand through his hair as he tried to make sense of what was happening. Was this real or just another level of the dream? "Thomas," Sarah's voice called from downstairs. "Are you awake, honey? Breakfast is ready." The normalcy of the moment was jarring after the surreal experiences he had just been through. Thomas swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood up, his bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. As he made his way downstairs, a sense of unease grew in the pit of his stomach. Everything looked exactly as it should: the family photos on the wall, the stack of mail on the side table, even the slight scuff on the banister where their son had once crashed his toy car. But something felt off, like a perfectly rendered image with one tiny detail out of place. He entered the kitchen to find Sarah at the stove, her back to him as she flipped pancakes. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, achingly familiar and comforting. "Good morning, sleepyhead," Sarah said, turning to greet him with a smile. "I was beginning to think you'd sleep the day away." Thomas crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her hair. She felt real, solid, and warm in his embrace. But as he held her, a fragment of memory flickered through his mind: Sarah, pale and still, lying in a hospital bed. He pulled back, studying her face intently. "Sarah, is this real? Are you real?" Her smile faltered for a moment, a flicker of something: sadness, fear, passing through her eyes. "Of course I'm real, honey. What kind of question is that?" Before Thomas could respond, a loud crash from the living room made them both jump. Sarah's eyes widened in alarm. What was that? Thomas moved towards the doorway, his heart pounding. As he reached the threshold, the world around him began to waver and distort, like a reflection in rippling water. The kitchen dissolved, replaced by a stark white room. Sarah was gone, and in her place stood Arthur, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, Thomas," Arthur said. "We're out of time. They've found us." "Who's found us?" Thomas demanded, frustration and fear battling for dominance in his voice. "What's going on?" The floor beneath them shuddered, and cracks began to appear in the walls. Arthur grabbed Thomas's arm, pulling him towards a door that had materialized on the far side of the room. "There's no time to explain," Arthur said urgently. "We need to go deeper. It's the only way to protect the information." "What information?" Thomas asked, even as he allowed Arthur to drag him through the door. "I don't understand any of this." They emerged onto a narrow bridge spanning a bottomless chasm. The bridge swayed precariously in a howling wind, and in the distance, Thomas could see dark shapes moving towards them, their forms indistinct and menacing. Arthur produced a small device from his pocket, pressing it into Thomas's hand. "This is a dream-sharing device. When I give the signal, press the button. It will take you to the next level down." Thomas stared at the device, then back at Arthur. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what's happening. Who are you, really? What am I doing here?" For a moment, Arthur's composed facade cracked, revealing a mix of desperation and determination. "You're not just Thomas Carter, the architect. You're also one of the world's foremost experts in dream-sharing technology. The work you've done, it's revolutionary, but it's also dangerous in the wrong hands." The bridge shook violently, and Thomas stumbled, nearly losing his footing. The dark shapes were closer now, their forms resolving into humanoid figures with blank, featureless faces. Arthur steadied him, his grip on Thomas's arm tightening. You hid the plans for your most powerful creation in the deepest recesses of your subconscious, then voluntarily underwent a procedure to forget everything. We're here to recover those plans before they fall into the wrong hands. Thomas's mind reeled at the revelation. Fragments of memories began to surface, late nights in a high-tech lab, heated arguments with government officials, Sarah's worried face as he told her about his decision to hide his work. "But why can't I remember?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. "The procedure was thorough," Arthur explained. "We're having to navigate through multiple layers of your subconscious to find the information. Each level we go deeper, we get closer to your true memories." The faceless figures were almost upon them now. Arthur pushed Thomas towards the edge of the bridge. "You need to go now. Find the plans, Thomas. Remember why you hid them. We'll hold them off as long as we can." Before Thomas could protest, Arthur shoved him off the bridge. As he fell, Thomas fumbled with the device in his hand, his thumb finding the button. He pressed it just as the chasm beneath him erupted into flames. The world dissolved into darkness, and Thomas felt himself sinking, as if submerged in thick, warm liquid. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself standing on a beach, the sound of gentle waves lapping at the shore filling his ears. The sky above was a tapestry of impossible colors, swirls of deep purple and vibrant green, punctuated by bursts of golden light that pulsed like distant stars. The sand beneath his feet shimmered with an iridescent quality, each grain reflecting a miniature rainbow. As Thomas took in his surroundings, he became aware of a presence beside him. He turned to find a young boy, no more than 10 years old, staring out at the alien sea. "Hello, Thomas," the boy said, his voice carrying in wisdom that belied his youthful appearance. "I've been waiting for you." Thomas knelt down, bringing himself to eye level with the child. There was something hauntingly familiar about the boy's features, like looking at an old photograph of himself. "Who are you?" Thomas asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. The boy smiled, a bittersweet expression that seemed out of place on his young face. "I'm you, Thomas. Or rather, I'm the part of you that remembers everything you've tried to forget." As the boy spoke, the beach around them began to change. The sand beneath their feet transformed into polished tiles, and walls sprouted up around them, forming a vast, circular room. At the center stood a pedestal, upon which rested a small, metallic object that pulsed with an inner light. "Is that?" Thomas began, his eyes fixed on the pedestal. The boy nodded. "The plans you hid, the key to dream manipulation on a scale never before imagined." Thomas took a step towards the pedestal, then hesitated. "Why did I hide it? Why go to such lengths to forget?" The boy's expression grew serious. "Because you realized the danger it posed. The ability to shape dreams, to influence the subconscious mind of others. In the wrong hands, it could be used to control entire populations, to rewrite reality itself." As the boy spoke, images flashed through Thomas's mind, visions of cities reshaped by the whims of dream architects, people wandering through life in a haze of manufactured memories, the very fabric of society unraveling as the line between dream and reality blurred beyond recognition. I remember, whispered, the weight of his decision settling heavily upon him. I couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands. But now they're coming for it, the boy finished. And you have to decide what to do. The room shuddered, dust raining down from the domed ceiling. In the distance, Thomas could hear the sound of approaching footsteps, echoing ominously through unseen corridors. There's no time, the boy said urgently. You have to make a choice, Thomas. Take the plans and risk them falling into the wrong hands, or destroy them and lose your life's work forever. Thomas stared at the pulsing object on the pedestal, his mind racing. All the years of research, the countless breakthroughs and setbacks, the potential to revolutionize human consciousness. Could he really bring himself to destroy it all? But then he thought of the visions he had seen, the potential for abuse and manipulation. He thought of Sarah, of the life they had built together, of the simple joys that made reality precious. With a deep breath, Thomas stepped forward and picked up the device. It hummed in his hand, vibrating with barely contained power. He looked at the boy, at himself, and saw understanding in those young eyes. I'm sorry, Thomas said, though whether he was apologizing to the boy, to himself, or to the world that would never know the full extent of his creation, he wasn't sure. With all his strength, Thomas hurled the device to the ground. It shattered on impact, releasing a blinding flash of light and a shockwave that knocked him off his feet. As he lay on the ground, the room dissolving around him, Thomas heard the boy's voice one last time. Wake up, Thomas. It's time to go home. The world exploded into a kaleidoscope of colors and sensations. Thomas felt himself falling, tumbling through layers of consciousness, each one peeling away like the skin of an onion. Fragments of memories flashed before his eyes, his first kiss with Sarah, the day he graduated from university, the moment he made his first breakthrough in dream technology. Each memory felt more real, more vibrant than the last, as if he were experiencing them all over again. And then, suddenly, stillness. Thomas opened his eyes to find himself lying in a hospital bed, the steady beep of a heart monitor filling the air. The room was dimly lit, the first rays of dawn peeking through half-drawn curtains. As his vision cleared, he saw Sarah sitting beside him, her hand clasped tightly around his. Sarah? He croaked, his voice hoarse from disuse. Her head snapped up, eyes wide with a mix of shock and hope. Thomas? Oh my God, Thomas. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead against his, tears streaming down her face. You're awake. You're finally awake. Thomas reached up with a shaky hand, cupping her cheek. How long? Sarah pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. 3 months. The doctors, they weren't sure you'd ever wake up. They couldn't explain what was happening to you. As Sarah spoke, the door to the room opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man in a white coat entered. His eyes widened as he saw Thomas awake and alert. Mr. Carter, the doctor said, quickly crossing to the bedside. This is remarkable. How are you feeling? Thomas considered the question. His body felt weak, as if he had run a marathon, but his mind was clearer than it had been in years. I feel awake, he said finally, more awake than I've ever been. The doctor nodded, making notes on a clipboard. We'll need to run some tests, of course. Your case has been unique, to say the least. As the doctor spoke, Thomas's gaze drifted to the window. Outside, he could see the city skyline, real and solid and blessedly normal. No impossible geometries, no shifting landscapes, just the familiar streets and buildings he had known all his life. "Doctor," Thomas said, interrupting the man's monologue about tests and observations, "could you give us a moment, please?" The doctor looked surprised but nodded. "Of course. I'll be back to check on you shortly." He left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. Thomas turned back to Sarah, drinking in the sight of her. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes and worry lines etched into her forehead. But she was here, real and solid and alive. "Sarah," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I need to tell you something. About my work, about why this happened." She shook her head, pressing a finger to his lips. "Shoo, it doesn't matter now. Whatever it was, whatever happened, you're back. That's all that matters." Thomas caught her hand, holding it tightly. "No, you need to understand. What I was working on, it was dangerous. More dangerous than I ever imagined. I had to protect it, to hide it somewhere no one could ever find it." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about, Thomas?" He took a deep breath, trying to organize his thoughts. How could he explain the layers of dreams, the technology that could reshape reality itself? How could he make her understand the choice he had made? "My research," he began slowly, "it wasn't just about dream sharing. It was about manipulating reality itself. The ability to shape dreams, to influence the subconscious mind. In the wrong hands, it could be used to control entire populations." Sarah's eyes widened as she listened, her grip on his hand tightening. That's impossible," she whispered. Thomas shook his head. "It's not. I did it. I created a device that could do all of that and more. But when I realized the implications, the danger, I knew I had to hide it. So I buried it in the deepest recesses of my own mind and then locked those memories away." He paused, the weight of his next words heavy on his tongue. "I chose to forget everything, Sarah, to protect the world from what I had created." Sarah sat back in her chair, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. "But why? Why would you do that to yourself? To us?" Thomas reached out, cupping her face in his hands. "Because the risk was too great. Because I couldn't bear the thought of my work being used to hurt people, to control them. And because I realized that no dream, no matter how perfect, could ever compare to the reality I had with you." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she leaned into his touch. "Oh, Thomas," she whispered, "what have you done?" He pulled her close, holding her as tightly as his weakened body would allow. "What I had to do, and now it's over. The plans are destroyed, the knowledge lost. We're safe." As he held Sarah, Thomas felt a profound sense of peace wash over him. The burden he had carried for so long, the weight of his secret knowledge, was gone. In its place was a renewed appreciation for the simple joys of reality, the warmth of Sarah's embrace, the soft light of dawn filtering through the window, the steady rhythm of his own heartbeat. For a long moment, they sat in silence, holding each other. Then Sarah pulled back slightly, wiping her eyes. "So what happens now?" she asked. Thomas smiled, a genuine, untroubled smile that felt foreign on his face after so long. Now we live, Sarah. We enjoy every moment of this beautiful, messy, unpredictable reality. No more dreams, no more secrets. Just us, facing whatever comes next, together. Sarah nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. Together, she echoed. I like the sound of that. As they sat there, the first full rays of sunlight burst through the window, bathing the room in a warm, golden glow. Thomas felt as if he were seeing the world anew, every color more vibrant, every sensation more intense. He had walked through the labyrinth of his own mind, faced the temptations of dream manipulation, and emerged on the other side with a renewed appreciation for the waking world. In that moment, Thomas made a silent vow. He would dedicate the rest of his life to embracing reality in all its imperfect glory. No more chasing impossible dreams or seeking to control the uncontrollable. From now on, he would find wonder in the everyday, joy in the simple moments, and fulfillment in the love he shared with Sarah. As the day began to unfold around them, bringing with it the bustle of hospital staff and the promise of recovery, Thomas felt truly awake for the first time in years. The dream was over, but the real adventure, the adventure of living, was just beginning. In the days and weeks that followed, Thomas's recovery was nothing short of miraculous. The doctors were baffled by his rapid improvement, running test after test to try and understand what had happened during his 3-month coma. But Thomas knew that no medical scan could reveal the journey he had undertaken through the layers of his own subconscious. As his strength returned, Thomas found himself rediscovering the world with childlike wonder. The taste of real food after months of intravenous nutrition was almost overwhelming. The feel of sunlight on his skin when he finally stepped outside the hospital brought tears to his eyes. Even the mundane act of tying his own shoelaces felt like a small miracle. Sarah was by his side through it all, her love and support unwavering. She listened patiently as Thomas slowly shared more details of his experience, never judging, always trying to understand. In turn, she filled him in on the months he had missed, the changing seasons, the progress of their friends' lives, the small dramas of everyday existence that he had once taken for granted. When Thomas was finally released from the hospital, he and Sarah decided to take a long vacation. They traveled to places they had always talked about visiting but had never found the time for. The sun-drenched beaches of Bali, the ancient ruins of Machu Picchu, the bustling streets of Tokyo. In each new location, Thomas marveled at the richness of the real world, so much more vibrant and unpredictable than any dream he could have designed. As they stood atop the Eiffel Tower one evening, watching the city of lights sparkle below them, Sarah turned to Thomas with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "The work you were doing, the possibilities you discovered?" Thomas was quiet for a moment, considering her question. Then he shook his head, a small smile playing on his lips. "No," he said finally. "What I was doing, it was incredible, yes, groundbreaking, but it was also dangerous. It made me lose sight of what really matters." He turned to face her fully, taking her hands in his. "All those layers of dreams, all the fantastical worlds I could create, none of them can compare to this moment, right here with you. This is real. This is what I want." Sarah's eyes glistened with unshed tears as she leaned in to kiss him. As their lips met, Thomas felt a surge of emotion so powerful it took his breath away. This, he realized, was what he had been searching for all along. Not the ability to control dreams or reshape reality, but the simple, profound connection of two people in love, fully present in the moment. When they returned home, Thomas made a decision. He would not return to his old field of study. Instead, he focused his brilliant mind on more benign pursuits, developing non-invasive therapies for trauma survivors, creating virtual reality systems to help people overcome phobias, designing educational programs that made learning feel like an adventure. His work was still groundbreaking, still pushed the boundaries of what was possible. But now it was firmly grounded in reality, aimed at helping people engage more fully with the waking world rather than escape from it. As the years passed, Thomas and Sarah built a life filled with love, laughter, and simple joys. They had children, watched them grow, celebrated triumphs, and comforted each other through sorrows. Through it all, Thomas never forgot the lessons he had learned during his journey through the dreamer's labyrinth. Each night, as he lay down to sleep, Thomas would take a moment to reflect on the day that had passed. He savored the memories of real experiences, the warmth of the sun on his face, the laughter of his children, the taste of a home-cooked meal shared with friends. And each morning, he would wake with a sense of gratitude and anticipation for the day ahead. Sometimes, in the hazy moments between sleeping and waking, Thomas would catch glimpses of impossible cities or hear echoes of the dreams he had once crafted. But these fragments no longer held any power over him. They were merely shadows, fading in the light of a new day. For Thomas had discovered a truth more profound than any dream technology could reveal. That reality, with all its imperfections and unpredictability, was the greatest adventure of all. And he was determined to live every moment of it to the fullest. As he grew older, Thomas became known not just for his scientific contributions, but for his philosophy of mindful living. He gave talks and wrote books about the importance of being present in the moment, of finding wonder in the everyday. People were drawn to his gentle wisdom, his ability to see the extraordinary in the ordinary. And through it all, Sarah remained by his side, his anchor to reality, his partner in the grand adventure of life. Together, they had traversed the labyrinths of dream and consciousness and emerged with a love deeper and more real than anything they could have imagined. On quiet evenings, they would often sit on their porch, watching the sun set over their garden. In these moments, Thomas would sometimes reflect on the journey that had brought him here. The temptation of dream manipulation, the lure of control over reality itself, seemed like a distant memory now. For in the end, Thomas had discovered that the most beautiful dream of all was the one he was living, a life filled with love, purpose, and the endless wonder of reality. And as he squeezed Sarah's hand, feeling the warmth of her skin against his, he knew with absolute certainty that he had made the right choice. The dreamer had awakened, and in doing so, had found a life more extraordinary than any dream could ever be.